LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the November 27th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out the top dozen clips from the weekend's, mostly the Sunday morning news analysis shows. One clip is actually from AM Joy, which was on Saturday morning, and there's no clip from Face the Nation, but other than that, it's the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, well, no CBS this week, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. I'm going to give you my best political commentary and media criticism for what should be a interesting, informative, fair use analysis of the corporate media for you all tonight, as usual. And as usual, if you're watching as a live show or a recorded show, I put a link down in the video description to this clip list of the 12 clips I'm using with my somewhat cryptic notes, but you should be able to figure out, each category I'm going through, who's speaking in each clip, and generally what the topic is and kind of what they're saying. But there's also a list of my 5 subtopics down in the video description. If you're watching as a recorded show, I'll put time indexes down in there so you can skip between the topics. And I usually like to start off with political comedy. There's no Bill Maher this week. There's no Saturday Night Live this week, but luckily just a few hours before I started the broadcast here, I did get some political comedy from Donald Trump. This is actually more on the second topic I'm going to cover, the recount, but this is what Donald Trump tweeted this afternoon. In addition to winning the Electoral College in a landslide, I won the popular vote if you deduct the millions of people who voted illegally. Now, why Donald Trump is tweeting that, I have several different theories. One has to do with the possibility that there are a bunch of votes that were thrown out that is going to come up in this recount, and that's something I'm going to cover in my second topic with this 4.5-minute clip from Joyanne Reid at AM Joy yesterday that has the most reasonable, even still very unlikely, but most reasonable scenario in which there is some change in the outcome through this recount, which I don't really think is going to happen. But I also think maybe Donald Trump is just really thin-skinned about this. He's also worried that Hillary Clinton's having this historic 2.2 million vote lead in the popular vote, and so he's trying to create this myth of a mandate. Maybe he just wants to, come up with something negative to say about illegal aliens. Maybe he wants to take over this whole recount story that's winning the news cycle and sort of take it over with his narrative, or I don't know. There are several different things that I could think of, and I'll talk about that more when I get to the recount, but I did want to do a couple clips on Cuba. Not so much as, I didn't think the death of Fidel Castro merited as much coverage as it got. I mean, it's kind of historic, but in terms of the news, he is sort of the former dictator in Cuba. He hasn't really been in power for 10 years now, and his brother Raul is still in power. But one of the things that I thought, this was going to be the humorous clip I was going to start the show with. It's Kellyanne Conway talking to Chuck Todd about what Donald Trump's policy will be on Cuba, whether he's going to change the deal that President Barack Obama made in opening up relations, whether he's going to ask for more. And you'll see at the very beginning of this clip, Kellyanne Conway says something about Donald Trump's brilliance and not his judgment, I can't remember, his brilliance and his great instincts that he showed during the campaign. And she didn't say it the way I think she meant to say it, but you'll see she almost laughs at her own talking point. You can hear Chuck Todd kind of scoff in the background. She inexplicably really brings up the recount at the end of the answer here, which is something I will discuss a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Doesn't he, if he is going to change it, there are many people who are making plans based on whether policy is going to change. Is it a definite that policy is going to change, or is it possible he keeps some of these changes in place?
Nothing is definite. He'll be speaking with his advisors, and he'll be applying the same brilliance and instinct and that he applied all throughout the campaign to all of these issues. And frankly, Chuck, I think the first order of business here, now that the dictator is gone, is to see how much we can do as, frankly, a world community, if not the United States of America, to try to get these political prisoners to freedom. I've met some of them, those who have been released. I've met many of these family members whose lives were devastated, whose entire, families were separated, if not destroyed. You know the stories that Senator Rubio, Senator
Is he willing
Cruz
to shut down? But let me ask you this. I know the stories very well. Is he willing to essentially shut down this diplomatic rapprochement on behalf of these political prisoners? Does he want to completely shut that down, or does he still want to keep that open?
That's for discussion. That's certainly on the table. And this is what, look, this is what leaders do. Leaders listen, they learn, they take the counsel of many people, they see what the circumstances are. And he's even been talking to President Obama. You know, beyond the sit-down they had 30 hours or so after President-elect Trump won the election, they've been talking regularly on a number of issues. They talked just yesterday.
And can you give an update on what they talked about, since you just said that? We like to hear news here. They talked yesterday. How long was the conversation?
They did. About 40 to 45 minutes. And I can tell you from President-elect Trump's side that he very much enjoys speaking with President Obama, talking about the serious issues that face this country and the world. They get along nicely. They disagree on many things. That's not going to change. But there is a respect there, and there is a respect for the process and the peaceful transition of power, which is why this recount by Jill Stein and now the Hillary people is just so confounding and disappointing. Their president, Barack Obama, is going to be in office for 8 more weeks, and they have to decide whether they're going to interfere with him finishing his business, interfere with the peaceful transfer of power to President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Pence, or if they're going to be a bunch of crybabies and sore losers about an election that they can't turn around.
I'm going to ask you about that in a minute, but I want to focus on this conflict of interest issue that...
And I'll show that conflict of interest question, which is the only conflict of interest question that I saw anyone ask Kellyanne Conway. That's actually the last clip I'm going to show in the broadcast. But did you notice how Kellyanne Conway brought up the recount when it was not even part of the topic? And it seemed like she was saying it was a threat to President Obama's legacy or the end of his term somehow to even bring up this whole recount issue. And like I said, I'm going to get to the recount issue in that's the second topic. There's only one more clip. I wanted to show Reince Preibus basically answer that same question that Kellyanne Conway answered. I didn't think she answered it very well. This is a case where I think Reince Preibus does better than Kellyanne Conway, although I'll show an example of the reverse in a later topic. But here's Reince Preibus starting off showing actually a clip of what Chris Wallace over on Fox News Sunday shows Reince Preibus a clip of what Donald Trump said about Cuba policy during the campaign, and I think Reince Preibus's answer is more understandable than what Kellyanne Conway said in that last clip, as I will explain after we watch that clip together here.
Campaign, Mr. Trump took a hard line about Barack Obama's efforts to restore relations with Cuba. Here he is in the campaign.
All of the concessions that Barack Obama has granted the Castro regime were done through executive order, which means the next president can reverse them. And that I will do unless the Castro regime meets our demands.
But Mr. Trump, in a statement that he issued yesterday about Castro's death, did not repeat that pledge. So the question, Mr. Preibus, is does Mr. Trump intend to follow through on his pledge to roll back Mr. Obama's opening of relations with Cuba?
Yes, he does, Chris, and good morning, and thanks for having me. I think President-elect Trump's been pretty clear that, you know, there's nothing wrong with talking to people. He's been willing to talk to anybody, but we've got to have a better deal. We're not going to have a unilateral deal coming from Cuba back to the United States without some changes in their government. Repression, open markets, freedom of religion, political prisoners. These things need to change in order to have open and free relationships, and that's what President-elect Trump believes, and that's where he's going to head. Talking is fine, but action is something that will be required under a President Trump.
So let me make sure I have this clear, because he's calling basically for a revolution in Cuba, full political freedom, full religious freedom, releasing all the political prisoners. If he doesn't get that, he is going to reverse President Obama's executive orders?
No, I didn't say that, Chris. I said that those were that's the suffering that's happening now in Cuba. But I do believe that in order for any sort of deal to take place, President-elect Trump is going to be looking for some movement in the right direction in order to have any sort of deal with Cuba. I mean, it can't just be nothing, and then you get total and complete cooperation from the United States. There has to be something, and what that something is, Chris, is yet to be determined, but I can assure you that he's going to require some movement or some schedule of movement in order to then schedule some kind of relationship with Cuba. But without knowing what those things are, there's nothing really more to talk about other than there isn't going to be a one-way relationship from the United States to Cuba without some action from the Castro administration.
But just to pin this down, if he doesn't get whatever it is that he wants, would he reverse President Obama's opening to Cuba?
Well, absolutely. I mean, he's already said that that would be the case. I mean, and what that deal is yet to be determined, but there is going to have to be some movement from Cuba in order to have a relationship with the United States. And I think the president-elect has been very clear about that, and I'm just restating that position.
While the president campaigned, Mr. Trump took a hard line about Barack Obama's efforts to restore relations with Cuba. Here he is in the campaign.
All of the concessions that Barack Obama has granted the Castro regime were done through executive order, which means the next president can reverse them. And that I will do unless the Castro regime meets our demands.
But Mr. Trump, in a statement that he issued yesterday about Castro's death, did not repeat that pledge. So the question, Mr. Preibus, is does Mr. Trump intend to follow through on his pledge to roll back Mr. Obama's opening of relations with Cuba?
Yes, he does, Chris, and good morning, and thanks for having me. I think President-elect Trump's been pretty clear that, you know, there's nothing wrong with talking to people. He's been willing to talk to anybody, but we've got to have a better deal. We're not going to have a unilateral deal coming from Cuba back to the United States.
Did that clip just start over there? Sorry about that. I was in the middle of talking to the live viewers about the... they're not supposed to do that where they start over. I must have messed up that one somehow, but I was talking to the live viewers about an audio sync issue, and I think I let the clip start over. I apologize for that, but I should have had some sort of like watchdog on the clip. So, oh, I do have a watchdog on. No, this is Sandy did help me set up. You can see in the doorway, and that's the chair I'm sitting in, but I'm not sitting in it yet over there. But that's the last clip I want to show on the whole Cuba issue, where, I mean, I think it is kind of, it's a real issue as to whether Donald Trump is going to get some sort of better deal from Cuba by threatening not to go through with the opening up of relations that President Obama promised. But it's not that huge an issue in American foreign relations, and the death of Fidel Castro doesn't really make it any bigger an issue, which is why I was kind of confused as to why the Sunday morning news analysis show spent so much time on the death of Fidel Castro. But you can disagree with me down in the comment section. So the next topic is this recount issue. Remember, I showed you at the beginning of the show that Donald Trump is claiming that he would have won the popular vote if it wasn't for the millions of people who voted illegally. And there's no evidence of any of that, but there is going to be a recount, and it's the Green Party, Jill Stein, and also the Reform Party candidate. I can't even remember his name, but they, or even if it was a man or a woman, but those two candidates have called for a recount in Wisconsin. It might spread to Michigan and Pennsylvania, and a lot of people talk about it in terms of hacking to look to see if there was Russian hacking of the votes, which I haven't seen any credible evidence of. And the conventional wisdom that I have pretty much agreed with is that if Hillary Clinton's campaign saw any, viable path to changing the election outcome, they'd be right on it. Although I guess I kind of had more faith in the how smart Hillary Clinton's campaign was on, how to win before she lost the election. If she really did lose the election, which is what this whole recount issue is about. But I want to show you this 4.5-minute clip from Joy Ann Reid and her guest, Rolling Stone investigative reporter Greg Palast, talking about an article he wrote last August, which I put a link to down in the video description. And I've also put a link in the video description to the longer segment this clip comes from, where there are other guests talking. But this is the most viable, reasonable theory I've heard, where the recount could come up with some sort of different result because of the way they excluded a whole bunch of votes. And that may be what Donald Trump was preparing people for with that weird tweet I showed earlier. And I'll talk about that a little more with you after we watch that clip from AM Joy yesterday morning over here.
Palast, because we had you on a couple of months ago to talk about your Rolling Stone article that was dated back in August 24th, and it says that it was titled "The GOP's Stealth War Against Voters. Will an anti-voter fraud program designed by one of Trump's advisors deny tens of thousands their right to vote?" It was about a program called Crosscheck that was created by Chris Kobach, who is now potentially up for a job in the Trump administration. And I want to read a little bit from your article. It says election officials in more than 24 states have compiled lists of citizens whom they allege could be registered in more than one state and eligible to be purged from the voting rolls. Rolling Stone obtained a portion of the list in the names of 1 million targeted voters. According to our analysis, the cross-check list disproportionately threatens solid Democratic constituencies, young, Black, Hispanic, and Asian American voters, with some of the biggest possible purges underway in Ohio and North Carolina, 2 crucial swing states with tight Senate races. To your knowledge, Greg, was cross-check in use in states like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, states that Hillary Clinton seemed on track to win but lost?
In Michigan and North Carolina, the wipeout of Black and Hispanic and young voters was massive, especially under cross-check. About 50,000 people lost their votes in Michigan because they were accused of voting twice or potentially of voting twice or registering twice. Nonsense, mostly minorities. That's 10 times Trump's plurality. North Carolina, it was huge. Maybe 100,000 voters, at least 35,000 voters lost their vote there. Here's the thing. Let's get away from this hacking stuff. I just got off the phone with the chief attorney, one of the top voting process attorneys that works with Stein. Bob Fitrakis, he's probably the top expert in the country on the legal process of voting. It's not about Russians hacking. It's not about playing games with the software. It's about machines that were miscalibrated. It's about the fact that we have about 500,000 absentee ballots in America, which are just thrown out for highly technical and questionable reasons. It's 2.7 million so-called provisional ballots when especially African Americans go in and their name is missing from the voter rolls and they're given a provisional ballot, which is then thrown in the dumpster. It's about ballots that are supposedly blank, but in fact have a mark on them and need to be reviewed. It's about machines that are off by 1/100th of an inch and don't read a mark on a ballot. It's about 90% turnouts in rural Trump areas, which is just astonishing and unreal. It's about blank ballots, which may not be blank. You have to look at this is a technical process. Forget the hacking stuff. Forget the conspiracy stuff. Forget Russians. This is this recount, this review of the ballots and decisions about which ballots are being thrown out and disqualified by the tens of thousands, swamps Trump's plurality in several states. And this is the secret of American, the hidden secret of American democracy. We don't count millions of votes. We literally don't count them.
And Greg, I want to stay with you on this just point for one moment, because I want you to make this point again. You put out the night after the election this series of tweets in which you compared the exit poll in a state like Wisconsin or Michigan or Pennsylvania with the result. Could the throwing out of absentee ballots, combined with knocking people off the voter rolls, combined with just not counting their provisionals, account for that difference?
You got it. I think you're the first journalist to get it in America. It's that when you leave for an exit poll, you say if you voted, but it doesn't say they don't ask you if your vote counted. Did you vote on a provisional ballot? Was your ballot thrown out for a technical reason, et cetera? And we're talking millions of votes. That pretty much accounts for this entire so-called red shift, where the exit polls, people said they voted for Hillary, but it comes out different in the final count. It's because of disqualified ballots. That's the real purpose of this so-called recount, which is, in fact, in most cases, to get a ballot counted in the first place.
And Karine, that is the point I think that a lot of Clinton fans are missing. Let's go back. I want to look at these margins of victory for Donald Trump in these crucial states that every single poll told Hillary Clinton should have won. Wisconsin, Trump wins by only 22,000 votes. 10,707 votes in Michigan. 70,000 votes in Pennsylvania. These are a pittance. Combined, Trump's margin is 107,000 across these three states. Are Democrats missing the point if they're worried about the machines being hacked and not worried about voter disenfranchisement, voter suppression in these states?
I think that's exactly.
So that is a theory. I mean, I don't know if there are that many people who voted and didn't have their votes counted. I haven't even read the full Rolling Stone article from Greg Palast from last August 24th that I put a link down in the video description that you can read. I looked at it briefly. But if that's true and there are all these votes that weren't counted that are greater than the margins of victory for Donald Trump, and it's part of this whole like this Chris Kobach-led effort, the Project Crosscheck or whatever that Republicans were using in their stealth campaign to stop people on, Democratic voters from being able to have their votes counted. That could be a reason why we're seeing Donald Trump do this bizarre tweet thing, although that's just one possible theory, and I don't know if that's true. Oh, and by the way, I was reading the live comments along the way. I saw this one from, I think it's 33 after M here. Let me get this. Yeah, I also noticed Greg Palast's hat choice. When people are on camera, they decide what they're going to wear, and someone else mentioned that he looked kind of like a real gumshoe, and I guess that's kind of the image he wants to project on camera. He is an investigative reporter, and like I said, I haven't read his whole article, and so I can't vouch for his reporting, but he was definitely wearing the right outfit to look like a reporter, so he must be a real investigative reporter with that hat, right? That's basically a comment from the live viewers that I think added some good, fair use media criticism to that last clip that we watched. So thank you for that, live viewers. And the next clip I want to show about the whole recount issue is sort of a counterpoint to that last one. This is Bernie Sanders on This Week with George Stephanopoulos talking to Martha Raddatz, basically discounting the whole recount issue. And I will discuss that clip with you after we watch it together over here.
This recount that's going to go on. You said right after the election that it's over. Mr. Trump will be the next president, and Democrats must focus on the realities of where we are. So are they wrong to do this recount and question the election's results?
The Democrats, Martha, are not doing the recount. I trust that you know that was initiated by the Green Party, who has every right in the world to do it.
I'm aware of that, but Hillary Clinton has joined in.
Well, of course they've joined it. It's taking a process. We will see what happens. It's a legal right. It's not a big deal. I don't think anybody, Secretary Clinton or anybody else, thinks there's going to be profound changes. We will see what happens. But the focus right now has got to be doing everything that we can to address the real issues facing the working families of this country. Mr. Trump talked about dissolving, doing away with the Affordable Care Act, throwing 20 million Americans off of health insurance. What happens to those people? He talked about the need to make college more affordable. Is he serious about doing that?
What has Trump's victory meant to the Democratic Party? What will transform it? What will change in the Democratic Party? And is it time for Hillary Clinton and the Clintons to just move on?
We don't have to make this personal. Secretary Clinton has served this country for 25 years. She got 2 million more votes than Donald Trump did in the general election. She has a role to play. But the real issue facing, I think, the Democratic Party is to assess where they are, and they're not in a good place. It's not just the White House, it's the Senate, it's the House, it's 2/3 of the governor's chairs. What we need to do, and what I am trying to do, is revitalize the Democratic Party, bring in the young people, bring in the working people, become less dependent on big money. A lot of campaign contributors, big money people have done a very good job. They've tried to help, but they can't be the dominant force in the Democratic Party. We've got to open the doors. We have got to go to 50 states in this country, not just the blue states or battleground states. There is no reason why we cannot win in states all over this country because we have a message that says at a time of massive income and wealth inequality, when the rich get richer and most other people are getting poorer, we're going to stand with working families. That is a message that will win if we take it to 50 states.
Okay, thanks very much for joining us this morning, Senator Sanders.
So that's Senator Bernie Sanders in an obvious attempt to pivot to the issues and move on to what he thinks is going to be the fight of the next 2, 4, and however many years against the Trump administration. And he's not buying into the whole recount. If you think that that's dispositive in some way, especially if you're a former Bernie Sanders supporter like I am, I don't think it's necessarily dispositive on that issue. We heard Reid and Greg Palast talking about it. Might not be something Bernie Sanders knows about, although what he said at the beginning there, I think, is an important point, that Hillary Clinton is joining into the Green Party recount. A lot of people have been making it look like it's Hillary Clinton's fault, and some of those people are going to be in the next 2 clips I'm showing. I'm going to show Reince Preibus and Kellyanne Conway address this whole recount issue on the Sunday morning shows. And if you recall, I showed earlier where I thought Kellyanne Conway did not do a good job of talking about Donald Trump's change in Cuba policy, and Reince Preibus did a better job of articulating that policy. This is the switch where I think actually Kellyanne Conway does a better job of answering the question about the recount, although that's the second clip, and you'll see she inexplicably brings up the recount out of nowhere, which also makes me kind of suspicious in addition to all the tweeting. But one of the reasons I think might be it's this whole mandate myth thing, and that's what Reince Preibus gets all cut up in his mandate myth-making talking points, where he doesn't even really answer the question from Chris Wallace, a fairly friendly questioner, of course, because it's Fox News Sunday, and you can see Reince Preibus's answer about the recount, and his starting off with the, like I said, the myth-making, the mandate myth-making talking points over here.
Green Party presidential candidate Jill Stein has initiated a vote recount in Wisconsin, and she's talking about doing the same in Pennsylvania and Michigan. And now we hear from the Clinton campaign's top lawyer that they are also going to participate in this recount. What is Mr. Trump's reaction to all of that, especially the Clinton campaign's participation in this recount?
Well, first of all, President-elect Trump won in a historic electoral landslide. This is an electoral process. It's not a popular vote process. He had the best performance since Ronald Reagan in 1984, winning over 2,600 counties, 9 of 13 battleground states, a historic margin that we haven't seen in our party in a long, long time. That's number one. Number two, if it was a popular vote, he'd have won the popular vote as well.
I know,
but let's get
I'm
to
talking
the question.
about the recount.
The question is, I got it, and it's ridiculous. This is a fundraising, notoriety-driven fraud by a person who won 33,000 votes in Wisconsin to President-elect Trump, who won 1.4 million. So here we have a person perpetrating a fundraising scheme that has lost by over 1.35 million votes in Wisconsin, attempting to undo a 28,000 vote lead. It's never going to happen.
But
it's a total waste of everybody's time.
But let me ask you, what do you think?
And in fact,
let me just ask, what do you think of the Hillary Clinton campaign now joining in on the effort?
Well, what I think is, let's just assume that that's true. I wonder whether Nate Elias and others are going to back off, since on election night, Hillary Clinton was the one to say it's time to accept the results of the election and look to the future. And it was their team that cut a deal with our team that said when the AP called the race, they would call within 15 minutes and concede, which they did. It is a total and complete hypocritical joke that the group of people that thought that they were nervous about President-elect Trump not conceding are the people that are conducting recounts in states where we've won by over 68,000 votes. I think the American people know this is a waste of everyone's time and money, and is only to divide this country when we need to come together, no matter who you are, Republican, Democrat, race, gender, whatever it is, and look forward to the future of rebuilding this country and getting us back on track. That's what President Trump is going to do. That's what we want to do. And this is a total and complete distraction and a fraud and something that they should drop. But look, they will waste our time. and we will staff up with thousands of people. We will sit there and look through Scantron ballots. We will win again for the second time, and they will lose again for the second time, but our country doesn't need it.
Okay, I want to get into two more quick issues with you.
So that's the Reince Preibus issue, answer there. And you notice at the beginning he was like all primed to talk about the popular vote versus the electoral college, and it's kind of similar to what you saw in that Donald Trump tweet I showed at the beginning. And so I thought that he was kind of caught off guard by the question, or at least the form of the question, because he was already with these talking points that didn't quite match up with what Chris Wallace was asking. But you saw him start to attack Jill Stein and attack the Clinton campaign for even joining in, and saying that it's all fraudulent. And I don't know if that's going to end up being true. I'll be very interested to see if there are a lot of provisional ballots that were thrown out or not counted, or if there end up being a lot of votes like what Joyanne Reid and Greg Palast were talking about. And before I finish this topic, I want to show one more clip. This is Kellyanne Conway over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos talking to Martha Raddatz about this same issue. And what's interesting about this, I mentioned this before, this is the tail end of her answering a question about why Donald Trump has flipped on his promise to jail Hillary Clinton and, lock her up and all that stuff. Well, now he says they're not going to pursue that. And she's at the end of her answer there and talking about how magnanimous Donald Trump is being. And she, again, inexplicably brings up the whole recount issue without even being asked about it. And then Martha Raddatz actually asks her about it, and you can see her go into her talking points about, attacking Jill Stein and Hillary Clinton and sore losers, crybabies, all that stuff, as I will discuss with you after we watch that ABC clip together from this morning over here.
Is making progress on naming his team. Is making progress on naming.
Hold on, I don't know why. Hold on here. Seems to be a problem. Oh. Here, hold on a second. I have to change the settings here. A little live. Okay, let's try it again.
I want to turn to the personnel this week. You waded into the cabinet selection process with some tweets this week concerning Governor Mitt Romney, saying you're receiving...
Oh, that wasn't even the right clip, so yeah, excuse me, here it is.
How the president-elect feels at this moment about Hillary Clinton, I would say in response that I guess her attitude towards that is to have her counsel, Mark Elias, go and join this ridiculously fantastical recount that Jill Stein is engaging in Wisconsin and perhaps elsewhere. So you've got the president-elect Donald Trump being quite magnanimous to Hillary Clinton, and you've got her responding with joining into this this recount where
and
Jill
he's
Stein
tweeted
had
about half a dozen times, I think. Why is he tweeting so much about that recount?
Well, he's able to weigh in. He has probably 30 million followers on Facebook and Twitter. But for him weighing in on issues like that on that platform, perhaps many of his followers would never hear the full information. But I guess the real question is, why in the world can't the Democrats, quote, accept the election results? All they did was ask people like me and Mr. Trump himself 6 ways to Sundays, 1 million times plus, Martha, will you accept the election results? Why, at the last debate in Las Vegas, did Mr. Trump say that he'll keep us in suspense, he'll let us know, he'll accept the election results if he wins? And now you've got Hillary Clinton, who on election night, Martha, called Donald Trump to both congratulate him and to concede the election to him. I was standing right there. Mr. Trump was on my phone with her. I didn't hear him say, well, Secretary Clinton just conceded, but she said, unless, of course, 2.5 weeks from now, Jill Stein, who got less than 1% of the vote nationwide, decides that she should issue a recount, raise $7 million and go have a recount in Wisconsin. Jill Stein got 33,000 votes in Wisconsin. Mr. Trump got 1.4 million. 33,000 votes is like the number of people who tailgate at a Packers game. It is not a serious effort to change the election results. So the question for the Democrats is, why are you doing this? And by the way, what does President Obama think of this recount charade? He has 8 weeks left to finish out his term, and I think it's quite small of Jill Stein and Hillary Clinton's counsel and perhaps her to interfere with the last 8 weeks of President Obama's legacy. President Obama and President-elect Trump speak regularly. They spoke yesterday at length. They're trying to move on and form a government. It's high time that Hillary and her supporters do the same.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks very much, Kellyanne Conway.
Sorry, I had such trouble getting that clip to play, and actually I started playing the next clip, which I'll get to in a minute. That was actually the last clip on the whole recount issue, and you saw there Kellyanne Conway did her whole thing about the crybabies, and she talked about Hillary Clinton already calling to concede the election. And actually one thing I forgot to mention about the previous Reince Preibus clip that I thought I hadn't heard before was that apparently the campaigns had an agreement that within 15 minutes of AP calling the election, there would be a concession call, which Hillary Clinton apparently honored that agreement, and now that's something Reince Preibus was saying that he's disappointed they're no longer honoring, although just like Bernie Sanders said in the clip before that, the Clinton campaign didn't initiate this recount, and they're really just participating to make sure that their interests are looked out for by their legal team. And I'm sure the Trump campaign's going to participate in the recount probably to that same extent. And I'll just be interested to see if anything comes of it. I would be surprised, but I've been surprised by a lot of things in this election, so who knows? I showed you the most optimistic way that might happen, or the theory that seems to be most viable, even very unlikely at the beginning of the topic. So you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I've been reading your live comments along the way about that. And now I want to move on to the next topic about some of the rivalries in the Republican Party, and especially the way former rivals and critics of Donald Trump have been coming around to Donald Trump. The first two clips are about the open warfare within the Trump campaign about whether Mitt Romney should be allowed to become Secretary of State after all the negative things he said about Donald Trump. And Kellyanne Conway has publicly tweeted against Mitt Romney becoming Secretary of State, which is kind of weird because she's part of the decision process. So why is she publicly tweeting? And so that's actually this first clip that I started to show you. It first it wouldn't play because I had messed up the settings, and then I changed the settings and started to play it and realized it wasn't the last clip, and it's actually what is supposed to be the next clip. And I really hope it plays when I click on it for you over here.
I want to turn to the personnel this week. You waded into the cabinet selection process with some tweets this week concerning Governor Mitt Romney, saying you're receiving a deluge of social media and private communications about Romney. Some Trump loyalists warn against him as Secretary of State, adding later that being loyal was an important quality for the job. Why did you weigh in on Governor Romney?
I weigh in privately. First of all, let me make very clear, Martha, that there's one person who will select his cabinet, and it's President-elect Donald Trump. Whatever he decides will have my full support and respect, and he knows that, as does Vice President-elect Pence. I think that there was the Never Trump movement, and then there was Governor Mitt Romney. He went out of his way to hurt Donald Trump. He gave two speeches that I can recall in this calendar year, and they were both about Donald Trump. Evan McMullin ran in the state of Utah for president. We don't know who Mitt Romney voted for, but apart from that, look, I'm glad they're talking. I've been critical of Mitt Romney in the past, and I also last week on your network and other places talked about how I was very pleased that the president-elect and Governor Romney had met out at Bedminster. I was there when they met. I'm glad that two job creators who also have the very rare privilege of having represented their Republican Party as its presidential nominee had a chance to discuss issues on the world stage.
I don't understand why you took to Twitter on this. Why you, Kellyanne Conway, took to Twitter on this. Why not go to Mr. Trump? Did he want you to tweet that? Or is that just you talking?
I won't discuss that, but I will tell you that I've already weighed in privately because I've been asked to. First of all, it's Donald Trump who's going to form his cabinet. But I did want to say something else. This is Trump's party now, and he won states that Mitt Romney lost. He's the one with the political instincts, the brilliance. This is his cabinet to form. I mean, he won Michigan. Mitt Romney lost it by 10. We won Pennsylvania. Mitt Romney lost Iowa by, I don't know, 5 points or so. We won it by 9. We won Ohio. And so I just think that the political instincts, and it wasn't just, I only wish Governor Romney had been as critical of Hillary Clinton and her policy positions. I'm all for party unity. I'm a big party unity person. And look what Donald Trump's done. He's got Nikki Haley in the cabinet, UN ambassador, daughter of Indian immigrants. He's met with Ted Cruz. He's taken calls from Mitt Romney, from Jeb Bush, from John Kasich, from Carly Fiorina. I think he's working with Speaker Reince Preibus, the RNC chairman, is now his chief of staff going into this new White House. So we're all for party unity. I don't think a cost of admission for party unity has to be the Secretary of State position.
I want to turn to Hillary.
I don't know. I don't understand, even after listening to that answer, why Kellyanne Conway is tweeting about whether Mitt Romney should be Secretary of State. And I am only showing that one answer. She also was on CNN's State of the Union and NBC's Meet the Press and talked about it on both of those. Over on State of the Union, she talked about how that people feel betrayed, that Trump supporters feel betrayed by the idea that Mitt Romney would be Secretary of State. So she uses very strong language, and I'm not sure what that's about, but I want to show Reince Preibus's answer, where he is saying that it's not really open warfare, even though from, I think, just that last question and answer, it seemed pretty clear it is open warfare. And this is talking to Chris Wallace over on Fox News Sunday about the same issue, and I'll talk about it with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Is making progress on naming his team. It seems that something close to open warfare has broken out over his deliberations about choosing a Secretary of State, especially when it comes down to consideration of Mitt Romney. Well, before you laugh, let me
I don't
make
know about open warfare.
Well, let me make my case.
Okay, go ahead, Chris.
If I will. Okay.
All right, make your case.
Then you can make fun of me, particularly in the consideration of Mitt Romney and Rudy Giuliani. Let me put this on the screen. Transition official Kellyanne Conway tweeted this on Thanksgiving. Receiving deluge of social media and private communications about Romney, some Trump loyalists warn against Romney as Secretary of State. And key supporter Mike Huckabee said this.
There's only one way that I think Mitt Romney could even be considered for a post like that, and that is that he goes to a microphone in a very public place and repudiates everything he said in that famous Salt Lake City speech.
Mr. Preibus, does Mr. Trump consider that appropriate for top advisors to lobby him in public about people he's choosing? Is that the kind of White House as chief of staff that you're going to run? And must Romney apologize to get the job?
Okay, so let me kind of package this up for you. There are a lot of opinions as far as this topic and many other cabinet positions. But I think what President-elect Trump has said is that, as he said, the entire campaign, he's going to hire the best people possible. So he's going through this process. He's interviewed and talked to Governor Romney. He's talked to the mayor. He's talked to others like General Kelly. He's going to be talking to more people next week. He's going to be making the best decision for the American people. It isn't a matter of warfare. I mean, there's a lot of opinions about this. And yes, it is a sort of a team of rivals concept if you were to go toward the Governor Romney concept. But I think that should tell all Americans about where President-elect's head's at, which is a place that will put the best possible people together for all Americans, no matter who you are, what religion, whatever your opinion is. He wants to move forward looking through the windshield and not the rearview mirror, and that's where President-elect's head is at, and I think it's a great place for Americans.
Is Romney going to have to apologize for the very harsh things he said during the campaign in order to get the job?
Well, I'm not going to do the play-by-play, Chris, on what's going to be required or where things are at. I think things are moving forward. I think President-elect Trump's going to keep talking to the right people and get opinions on what the right decision would be, but ultimately it'll be his decision. And I can just assure the American people the fact that he's actually even flirting with the idea of choosing a rival, should tell the American people where he's at, which is the best place for everyone in this country.
Let me ask you quickly about another name that's being mentioned for Secretary of State.
So, I don't know, the way they're trying to make the most of the idea of flirting with picking a rival it makes me think that Mitt Romney is not going to be Secretary of State. You heard in that previous clip that Kellyanne Conway had this whole list of people where Donald Trump was reaching out, and Mitt Romney was one, Nikki Haley was another, which I don't think there's a loyalist explanation for picking Nikki Haley, which is that making her UN ambassador opens up the spot for the lieutenant governor, McMaster's, who was one of the earliest supporters of Donald Trump. So that's not really a team of rivals, and I'll be surprised if Mitt Romney becomes Secretary of State. But before I leave the topic of the rivals, as I said in the video description about this topic, I want to show two of the Sunday morning news anchors seeming to take real enjoyment in making former rivals of Donald Trump kind of eat their words now that they're supporting President Trump. First, I'm going to show you Martha Raddatz with Senator Ted Cruz, then Dana Bash with Senator Marco Rubio. And, you know, this is Lion Ted, and that's the one thing I think, she didn't bring up the whole Lion Ted thing, but she did bring up what that Ted Cruz has called Donald Trump a pathological liar, but he doesn't want to relitigate the past, and he wants to move on. You know, the people have spoken, as I will discuss with you after we watch that clip here.
Just go back a little bit, back to the campaign, which at times was very bitter. You had some very strong words about then candidate Trump. Listen to this.
This man is a pathological liar. He doesn't know the difference between truth and lies. He lies practically every word that comes out of his mouth. The man is utterly amoral. Morality does not exist for him.
Do you regret any of those words?
Well, listen, it was a hard-fought campaign. It was hard-fought on all sides. And it was vigorous till the end. But at the end of the day, the people have spoken. He won the election. He won the nomination. And he won the general election in convincing manner. And my focus is on the country. My focus is we have a new president. We have a mandate. We ought to deliver on that mandate. We ought to deliver. This election was about jobs. It was about the fact that for the last 8 years, working men and women in this country have seen their lives, they've seen wages stagnating, they've seen factories closing. We need an administration that fights every day for the working men and women of this country. That's my #1 priority in the Senate, fighting for 27 million Texans, for jobs, for economic growth, to raise wages.
I just want to go back to those words. He lies practically every word that comes out of his mouth. Do you still think Donald Trump is a liar?
You know, I'm not going to relitigate the past. I'm going to focus on the future. I'm going to focus on what's in front of us and on fixing the problems we have. I will say one thing, Martha, that's going to be an interesting test just in the next few days. I very much hope that we don't see any U.S. government officials going to Fidel Castro's funeral. I hope we don't see Barack Obama and Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton and Democrats lining up to lionize a murderous tyrant and thug. If you wouldn't go to Pol Pot's funeral or Stalin's funeral or Mao's funeral because they were murdering communist dictators, then you shouldn't be doing what Barack Obama and Justin Trudeau are doing, which is celebrating Fidel Castro, a murderous communist dictator.
Thanks so much for joining us, Senator.
So, I'm not sure, did any U.S. officials go to Mao's funeral in, like, I think it was 1976? Isn't that when Mao died? I'm not sure. I didn't have time to check it out, but you can let me know if you know down in the comment section. But how do we even get to that topic when that was a total non sequitur that Lion Ted brought up there when he was talking about pathological liar Donald Trump and how he's, like, moved on and is now supporting the pathological liar with no morals whatsoever, who said that his father may have been involved in the death of John F. Kennedy, all that, and attacked his wife. And but you notice how Martha Raddatz there, she really seemed to enjoy that, and especially coming back at the end and saying, yeah, enough with all the platitudes. What about what you said? Is he still a liar? And of course, Senator Ted Cruz did not want to answer that question, and it's very similar to the way Senator Marco Rubio wouldn't answer very similar questions from Dana Bash about how he said that, of course, little Marco, she didn't bring up the whole little Marco thing, but she did show Marco Rubio talking about Donald Trump being erratic and not being someone you can trust with the nuclear codes, and you can see his response over in this clip.
Senator, I want to talk about the election that just happened. You endorsed Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton, but it wasn't that long ago you were running against Mr. Trump for the GOP nomination, and you called him unfit for the presidency. Take a listen.
We're about to turn over the conservative movement to a person that has no ideas of any substance on the important issues, the nuclear codes of the United States, to an erratic individual.
Senator, do you still have those concerns about President-elect Trump?
Well, Dan, at the bottom line, we had an election, and ultimately the voters chose him, both as our nominee and now as our president. So the election is over, and now it comes time to govern, and we're going to give him every chance to be successful. And that's what I'm focused on now. At some point, elections end, and the governing needs to begin. So we'll have another election for Congress in 2 years, and another election for president in 4. But right now, my hope is that this president is given the opportunity, this president-elect is given the opportunity to be successful. And that's been a long tradition in this country. When the election ends, you don't root against the president-elect because you understand that while you'll have significant policy disagreements with them, whether they're in your party or not, if they don't succeed, the country gets hurt. So I'm going to give him every opportunity to be successful. He has earned this position. He was elected to this position, and he deserves the opportunity to be successful.
Senator, I completely get that elections are over and now it is time for governing, but given the fact that it is time for governing, and your criticism was about his abilities to govern, even as far as saying that he shouldn't have the nuclear codes because he's too erratic, what will you do as senator, as somebody who actually has the responsibility of check and balance to make sure that he is governing properly given the concerns that you expressed?
The same as I would do with anybody else who's elected. I mean, we have a role in the Senate, for example, in cabinet appointments and nominations, that we'll review each of those, and we'll play our proper role under the Constitution. We'll do the same with public policy. If I would agree with him on a public policy, I'll work with them on it. If I disagree with him, I'll oppose it. And that's the job of the Senate, not to be a rubber stamp. But that doesn't mean we open this broadcast here today by attacking the person or our differences. There's no doubt that during the campaign, I wanted to be the president of the United States. The voters chose differently, both in the Republican primary and ultimately in the general election. So the campaign ends, and now he should be given the opportunity to be successful. And again, if I agree with him on something, I'm going to be a supporter and work hard to achieve it. And if I disagree with him on a policy matter, then I'll come on this show and others, and I'll talk about why I believe that's the wrong way forward and offer an alternative.
So do you feel comfortable now with Donald Trump in charge of the nuclear arsenal?
I feel comfortable that the voters have chosen him to be the commander-in-chief, and we're going to give him every chance to be a successful one. And ultimately, it'll be incumbent upon him, as it would be upon any president who is elected, but to prove their capability in that role. And he deserves that opportunity. He has earned it at the ballot box.
Senator, let's talk about the way that he's...
So in honor of Senator Marco Rubio, I have to do a little Marco Rubio there, a little Mr. Thirsty, and he actually seemed to need a drink of water through a lot of his interviews. He was actually on Face the Nation and CNN State of the Union, and I'm about to show a clip of him from Meet the Press, but the one comment I wanted to make on that last clip was to compare it to the previous one from Martha Raddatz. The questioning was very similar. They brought up the inconsistencies, both of them at the end. Martha Raddatz, I don't know, for some reason I think she seemed to enjoy rubbing Ted Cruz's nose in it a little more than Dana Bash did on CNN State of the Union, but that's sort of a subjective analysis, trying to read their facial expressions and tones of voice. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. So that's the last clip on the rivals topic. I have two quick topics here at the end. First, I want to show one more Marco Rubio Mr. Thirsty clip. So this is on a topic that I have done a lot of work on. I've tried to do my part to help pass legislation here in California that makes undocumented immigrants safer from when they come in contact with local law enforcement, which you don't want local law enforcement enforcing federal immigration laws, so that people who are undocumented feel safe talking to police when they're crime victims or crime witnesses. Otherwise, it makes our communities less safe for everyone. That's just one of many reasons why it's important that we bring undocumented immigrants out of the shadows, and and the vast majority are people who are contributing members of our communities. And one group that I'm most concerned about, I know several people who qualify or what are called dreamers or have gotten DACA status. That stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. They're people who were brought here by their parents when they were kids, undocumented, but through no fault of their own. And then some of them grew up from like the age of 2 or 1, or are basically Americans their whole lives, don't know anything about the country where they were born, but they don't have legal status. And so President Obama gave them this legal status. And it's really sad. In this next clip, Marco Rubio is talking about how they may get some legal status, no citizenship, and it's a far cry from the comprehensive immigration reform that he was one of the, what was it, the Gang of 8, and I can't even remember how many senators there were in the Senate that had this immigration reform package that seemed to look like it was going to give a path to citizenship. Well, here there's a possible legal status just for the dreamers, and Chuck Todd, in his questioning, he seems to say that they're getting amnesty even though they just have like a temporary reprieve from the danger of being deported. To Chuck Todd, apparently, in his question, that's amnesty. And I'll discuss Marco Rubio's answer after we watch the question and answer together over here.
Donald Trump is going to rescind a lot of executive orders that President Obama made. I may ask you one specifically. It's called DACA, essentially for dreamers, granting essentially, we can shorthand it here, amnesty for those who were brought into this country as children, and so that they're protected and not deported. What is your recommendation to Donald Trump on that specific executive order?
So my recommendation would be that there are people that have already availed themselves of that, and that there's a period of time for that. I would not retroactively remove their status. I would say that from some point forward, people will not be allowed to apply for renewal for that status. And that will give us a defined period of time to work through this, beginning with border security and modernization of the legal immigration system.
So don't rescind it
quickly,
immediately.
Well, people already have it. So someone has that DACA permit, but it's not indefinite. It expires. And what I would say is if you have it, you'll have it for the remainder of that period of time, but you will not be able to renew it. In the meantime, when it's not a long period of time, but it does give us the time to do border security, modernization, and then move to something very reasonable for people like those who came here as children or those who have been here for a long time who are not criminals, to allow them to attain some legal status through a legal way, not an unconstitutional way, which is what DACA is.
We'll have more of my interview with Senator...
Well, DACA is not unconstitutional. There's actually a 4-4 tie, and it wasn't even on DACA. It was on DAPA, which was this expansion of DACA, and I don't even really want to go into all that, but I don't think DACA was in any way unconstitutional. It was just the president saying that he was not going to prioritize deportation. That there's a question as to whether he could mandate that they be given official documentation, like that's what they got. They got cards that gave them some sort of, it wasn't legal status, but it was registration, and now it may even be used against them. It's a really sad situation for people who don't understand, those who say that people are under threat because of the election of Donald Trump. They don't understand people like the Dreamers and the DACA program, and how there are real people in our communities who may have their lives torn apart by this election. And what Marco Rubio said there didn't make me feel much better about that possibility. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And so this last clip, this is the final topic, and this was, I think, the only question asked of a Trump surrogate on all the Sunday morning news programs. Not even, there may have been a Marco Rubio. I can't remember if Marco Rubio was asked about this. I remember over on ABC they talked about it in the panel discussion. Cenk Uygur, in a clip I didn't take, was on the panel, and he specifically talked about Donald Trump's conflicts of interest. And it's a big, big topic, and It's not really going away. It's one of my theories. I don't think I mentioned in my multiple theories as to why Donald Trump was tweeting bizarre things like the recount and how there were all these illegals who voted. One of my actual theories is it's a way to try to stop the media from talking about his big conflict of interest problem. And I want to show how Kellyanne Conway does not do a very good job of answering that question, talking to NBC's Chuck Todd on Meet the Press this morning. And this is the final clip, which I will discuss with you after we watch it together here.
This conflict of interest issue that you guys are trying to work through. President-elect Trump told this to the New York Times. He believes, and obviously he legally can do this. He says he can run his business perfectly and run the country perfectly, but he knows he's got to do something. What does he plan on doing, and what is that something when it comes to not having the appearance that he's going to profit, his companies will profit off of his presidency?
First, let's be fair. It's not as if he said he's going to be doing two things at once. What he's saying is that his company could be run perfectly, and he has been very public about the fact that his 3 adult children who are involved in the company, Ivanka, Don Jr., and Eric, will in fact continue to have very senior roles as executives of the company. And so he has been talking to his lawyers. He's been talking to ethics compliance folks. Everything will be done the way it needs to be done. But Chuck, there's no question that we're in unprecedented times. This country's not accustomed to having a successful businessman and job creator of tens of thousands of people at the helm. We're just accustomed to typical politicians ascending through the ranks. So it is different, but it's a large part of why people elected him. And I think the presumptive negativity that some people have toward him, that he won't get this right, is counting him out and betting against Donald Trump, which is never a good idea.
Let me
will get this right.
Peggy
he
Noonan.
will comply with the law.
Let me quote Peggy Noonan, no member of the liberal media. Here's what she wrote this weekend. It would be a painful act, selling the business he loves and around which he has ordered his life. But there would be comfort in this, in doing the right thing, in denying his opponents a sword, and enhancing his stature and demonstrating that, yes, he will sacrifice for his country. That's pretty great comfort. You've made your money. Now go be a patriot. She's recommending that he take the advice of the Wall Street Journal editorial page and just simply liquidate it all. Why won't he do this?
It's not that simple, and that was actually raised in that New York Times on the record interview as well. And a couple of things that President-elect Trump said in that interview is that selling, real estate is not just selling off real estate is not just like selling stocks, and that why deny his adult children the ability to do what they do so brilliantly already, which
why
is
won't he
be
put the
executives
country
at the highest levels
Isn't
of the
this
Trump
a case
Corporation.
Where he should put the country ahead of himself and ahead of his children in this case?
Chuck, he has put the country ahead of everything else. Just running and indeed winning and becoming the president of the United States. He has shown that he does this. He didn't need to run. He didn't. All the usual motivators are elusive to him. The power, the money, the fame, the position, the stature. He did it because he loves the country. And he doesn't like, he and 72% of the country did not like the direction in which it was going. But we have to give him, I went back and looked at what all the press clips and the conversations on shows like this were 8 years ago. It was basically debating just how cool Barack Obama is. But so we should at least, if we're not going to do that about President-elect Trump, we should at the very least trust him to do the right thing and comply with the law.
I understand every knee-jerk pushback is going to be to blame the media. It's a crutch. I get it, and I'm used to it.
Not by me.
But it's not the facts.
Not by me.
But let me ask you this.
That's not fair.
Why are you campaigning against Mitt Romney as Secretary of State?
And I already showed you her answer on Mitt Romney, but I had to keep playing it through that Chuck Todd little jab at the end there about how you're always going to be attacking the media and it's going to be your crutch. And I think that's going to be, we're going to be seeing that for years now with Kellyanne Conway going on the shows and attacking the media when the real story is this conflict of interest where basically my analysis, having read a bunch of stories on this and actually being a lawyer, but not, in that specialty. So take what I say with a grain of salt in terms of not really having the expertise to really comment as a lawyer. I'm not saying I'm doing that. I'm just pointing out that I have some general knowledge about those issues and, about the Constitution. I happen to have my Constitution of the United States here. I know what the emoluments clause is and all that stuff. And the thing is, Donald Trump he said in his New York Times interview that, it's if the president does it, it's not a conflict of interest. Well, that's what Richard Nixon said in his famous David Frost interview. If the president does it, it's not illegal. But what Donald Trump is saying is there's no law that passed by Congress that makes it illegal for the president to have a conflict of interest. The Congress could theoretically pass a law if they weren't, Republicans aligned with Donald Trump. But even if they did, the only way to enforce that law would be the same way that the emoluments clause in the Constitution it would be enforced, which is through the Congress impeaching Donald Trump for profiting from his office based on, from foreign money, which seems fairly likely based on all of his holdings. And is a Republican Congress really going to impeach him? I mean, it would make Mike Pence the president of the United States, and maybe there will come a point in Donald Trump's presidency where the Republican Congress would rather have Mike Pence than Donald Trump. That would be like a really interesting but very unlikely turn of events, but who knows? We're in uncharted, unprecedented territory, and I don't think Kellyanne Conway in any way assuaged my feelings, or that, the Trump children, they're not going to be able to, that they're going to be poor and unemployed if Donald Trump liquidates his assets. That's basically all he could do, is like sell off all of his holdings and then put the resulting however much money, he says billions and billions of dollars. It might actually just be hundreds of millions of dollars if you hear people like Mark Cuban criticize his inflating his wealth, or saying he's bigger than he really is in terms of his assets, his financial assets. I mean, of course. It's quite possible. At least hundreds of millions of dollars if he liquidated everything and then put that in a blind trust, and I'm sure his children could find some sort of employment. Don't they have skills? I don't know. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section, but that's the last clip, like I said, I want to show you. And if you want to help support all these clips I picked out for you and my political commentary and media analysis, as usual, you can give me direct fan funding by clicking on the little I in the corner here, or become one of my monthly patrons by clicking on the link down in the video description to my Patreon page. Sometime in the next month, for sure, definitely. There's been all this ACLU stuff going on in real life, some of which I will be able to talk about in the next few weeks. One thing that happened, I'll actually be delaying my show on December 11th because I have to go to this ACLU meeting and have my chapter get honored for work we've been doing, and I'll talk about that more hopefully in the next couple weeks. But some of those things have been stopping me from being able to make edited, produced videos, but before the end of the year I will definitely be giving a sneak peek to my patrons of my video book review of this book right here, Who Cooked Adam Smith's Dinner? Is Economics Anti-Feminist? I don't know if anyone is interested or really wants to watch that anymore, but I will be making that video, and hopefully some other edited, produced videos in the next week or two. But I will definitely be back next week, probably around the same time, around 4 or 5 p.m. Pacific time, which is Greenwich Mean Time minus 7, I think, around with after daylight savings. And until next week, or until I have time to put up my next edited, produced video, I will be seeing all of you around the internet.